Good evening, sir. Ma'am, can we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, Vedant, start.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. This is Vedant Vaishali Jayant. I am the Associate Convener of Center for Women, Child Rights, Gender Justice, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. Welcome to all the dignitaries and the participants present here virtually. A very hearty and warm welcome to each and everyone for this national webinar on the topic Empowering Women Through Constitutional Guarantees, which is organized by Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice of Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai. This is to celebrate Constitution Day. Today is the most auspicious day and a memorable day. Auspicious because Constitution Day, and memorable as today, for the first time in the history of independent India, the ratio of women has surpassed men. That is, for 1,000 male, there are 1,020 females, and this is a historic thing. And today, we are going to discuss women empowerment through constitutional guarantees. So, this is a very auspicious day, and we can say a very coincidental event. As architect of India's constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar famously stated, Constitution is not a mere lawyer's document, it is a vehicle of life, and its spirit is always the spirit of age. And to continue this, we are organizing this national webinar. This program is being organized under the able guidance of our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Dilip Ukeji, who couldn't attend this session due to his personal work, but his guidance is always there with us. I welcome all our respected dignitaries, respected Registrar Sir, Professor Dr. Anil Varyar, our Honorable Chief Guest for today's national webinar, Ms. Nishtha Satyam, Coordinator for Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice, Dr. Karuna Malviya ma'am, Joint Coordinator, Assistant Professor Shriya Mukta ma'am, and I welcome to all the participants to this national webinar. Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai is one of the premier law universities in India, which was established in 2014. The university disseminates advanced legal knowledge under guidance and mentorship of university's Chancellor Justice Dr. Dhananjay Yashwant Chandrachud, who is Honorable Judge Supreme Court of India. We have established the Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice in MNL Mumbai to promote research and academic collaboration to create a gender just society through collaborations with government agencies by organizing programs and training for for creating gender awareness among locals, marginalized and underprivileged section of the society. We also provide free legal aid to distressed women and other gender minorities. Before we start with today's webinar, I would request to everyone to kindly keep their microphones on mute. Now I request Dr. Karuna Malviya ma'am, who is the coordinator for Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice, to give the opening address.
Yes,
Over to
thank you,
ma'am.
Vedant. Yeah, thank you, Vedant. Hello and good evening to everyone. With due respect to the dignitaries present here, on behalf of Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai, I extend very warm welcome to all of you. With pride and humble gratitude, I welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Dilip Ukeji in his absence here. Sir had some urgent meeting due to which he could not attend today's session. However, under Sir's expert guidance and impeccable knowledge,
I think Karuna ma'am is facing some network issues.
Some network issues are there.
Yes, sir.
I think I had lost connection in between.
Yes,
Yes,
madam. You lost connection.
Yes, sorry for interruption. So yes, we welcome our
Vedant, in the interest of time, should we continue? Oh, she's back.
corpus by producing academic literature. This special day, I recollect a part of Dr. Ambedkar's speech in the Constituent Assembly on 4th of November 1948, in which he moved a motion for adoption of the draft constitution as settled by drafting committee. We as a nation are forever indebted to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and our founding fathers for drafting the visionary constitution, which is predicated on the ideas of inclusive justice, liberty, and equality. November 26, which was earlier celebrated as Law Day, marks the day when India had adopted its constitution back in 1949, more than 2 years after attaining independence from British rule. The constitution came into effect next year on 26 January 1950 as to commemorate the pledge of Purna Swaraj passed in the Lahore session. Mr. Vedan to take the session ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your opening address. Now I request esteemed Registrar Sir, Professor Dr. Anil Varia, to kindly give the opening address.
Yeah. Very good evening to all. Thank you, Vedant. The chief guest of the day, Srimati Nishta Satyam, our director of this center, Dr. Karuna Malavia, joint coordinator, Shreya Mukta, all other participants who have joined here today. Many of our faculties also have joined. So it is a great pleasure that the Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice has selected a very relevant topic especially on the day of Constitutional Day. It's very good, and also I must congratulate the center for equally locating and identifying a suitable chief guest for the day also. So both ways you deserve to be commended. So I welcome you all to this platform on behalf of MNLU and also on behalf of Vice Chancellor. He is traveling outside on other purpose, so he is not able to join. See, I don't take much time. I'll just wind up my words in 2-3 sentences. But one thing I would like to remind that as a system, our country has always in the forefront of adorning the woman, respecting women. And especially I belong to a community where matriarchal system prevailed traditionally. Understand? So I don't know, in the history, in the due course of history, sometime the social fabric has changed and the patriarchal system came into, and women were given a lesser role in the society. Maybe because of other reasons, maybe because of political reason, maybe because of invasion, so many things, maybe. But as a system, we always remembered women, always revered women. We have given the place of goddess to them, and the motherhood what we have for every Indian. Mother is a, it's an emotion, boundless emotion, and we see in every woman a mother. And our scriptures have taught us wherever women are adorned, there dwells gods. But unfortunately, in reality, things are not so good, so advice, so nice as we say. But the Constitution of India, rights from its enactment, has given so much of rights to women. And again, you would be surprised to note that there had been considerable representation of women in the Constituent Assembly itself. So women were also part and parcel of the constitutional making process. But it is not a question of law or rights. There is no lack of law or rights. It is the problem is in the institutions which implement those rights and the institutions which should guarantee the rights. And that also reflect the mindset of the society. So I wish that this and similar conferences and gatherings shall bring in a fundamental change in the system, a systemic change in the mindset, so that our womanhood will continue to enjoy the respect and reverence that they said to have been enjoying in the past. So with these words, I wish all the success to the program. And madam, we are all waiting to hear you. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, sir, for your opening address. And as rightly pointed out by you, that since ancient times in India, women have been given great status. Just quick reference: if we go in our mythology, the great Mahabharata and Ramayana, the god, that is Lord Krishna or Lord Ram, were recognized by their mother's name, Kaushalya Nandan Ram or Devaki Nandan Krishna, or Pitama Bhishma was throughout his death, when he was in the deathbed, he was called by Lord Krishna as Ganga Putra Bhishma. So that is our great legacy which we have in our culture. So thank you very much, sir. For calling our honorable chief guest, Ms. Nishta Satyam, to deliver the address, I would like to give a brief introduction about her. Ms. Nishta Satyam was appointed as the Deputy Country Representative for UN Women, the entity of the United Nations that is dedicated to working towards gender equality and women's empowerment in India in January 2018. As the youngest woman to represent UN women amongst 193 countries. Nishta ma'am is an unapologetic feminist, a trained economist with a keen interest in applied macroeconomics and fiscal policy. In a long-standing career in the United Nations, she manages the UN Women Office for geopolitically diverse group of countries, including India, Bhutan, Maldives, Sri Lanka. Ma'am has also served as private sector partnership specialist with Office of the Resident Coordinator of the United Nations and UNDP. Prior to her career with United Nations, she worked with leading firms such as KPMG and American Express as an economist, as a futurist, and a feminist. She is loud advocate of urgency to mainstream women across the marketplace and community. Nishta ma'am serves national and international committees, including National Committee Review CEDAW, the Advisory Board on Program on Artificial Intelligence of Global Policy Insights, the National Committee to Review Gender Budgeting, amongst many others. As a policy expert to governments, Nishta ma'am's interest lies in the intersection of policies, politics, and for people to foster lasting change for the most marginalized. She writes a bi-monthly column for News Laundry called She Says, and she is regularly quoted in leading newspapers. She also participates in regular Twitter chats, webinars with the governments, CSOs, NGOs to raise awareness and discuss issues that highlight the importance of equality, justice, and placing women at the center of development through UN Women India's Twitter channel, reaching over 500,000 of people. She is currently in the midst of writing her first book to be published by Speaking Tiger on women's rights. Nishta ma'am holds a master degree in international business from University of Nottingham, United Kingdom, and Bachelor's of Economics from University of Delhi. With this brief introduction, I invite Nishta ma'am to kindly take over the stage. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vedant. Thank you very, very much for that exhausting and exhaustive long introduction. As someone would say, only my mother would believe that introduction. But I'm really glad that you managed to capture all parts of my bio, but one, which is my current title. I'm currently the country rep for Timor-Leste, which is one of the most newly independent countries in the world, has gone through a history of revolution, struggle. I'm currently still based in India because I haven't been able to take the flight out because of COVID, but I am flying on the 12th of December. But yes, I have managed the India office for almost 8 to 9 years. And of course, as an Indian, Vedant, thank you for using the word auspicious, because we never associate these words with the Constitution. And no matter how much you celebrate the Constitution, you can never give a fitting tribute to the marvelous piece of work, to the marvelous piece of guidance that we have in the Constitution. So congratulations to all of you for belonging to a country that is really one of the most affirmatively legislated, strongly legislated countries in the world. In my own view, I haven't read a more interesting, a more thought-provoking, a more wonderful document than our own constitution. But as you did quote B.R. Ambedkar ji in the beginning, it is not a mere document, it is a vehicle. It is in the spirit of life that we celebrate the Constitution today. My special regards to Dr. Anil Veriath, who's the Registrar General, who's been kind enough to spare his time today, for Dr. Karuna, who's really been following up with me, I think now for 6 months. In fact, it was quite surprising the first time we exchanged a conversation. I went down with COVID. I couldn't do the session that I was supposed to do once before this because of something very, very urgent. So I am actually, honestly, at a personal level, very glad that I could make it today, and I think there's really no better day than to appear and to talk to a set of students and co-learners about the Constitution. As we celebrate what I call the most remarkable piece of work in Indian history, we must also remind ourselves that as Dr. Anil has, there have been founding fathers to the Constitution, but we've also had some founding mothers. There were 15 remarkable, wonderful, very learned women who are a part of the design of the Constitution that we celebrate today. And I'd like to acknowledge each one of them. And we will talk about them as we go forward. I understand that I have 20 minutes, which I don't want to take. I don't want to take just 10 minutes to be speaking to you, because the idea is to listen to you a lot more. But as I have been given the responsibility to talk with all of you and to really have a discussion with all of you about the Constitution, it's also very important that it will only be true to my character that we talk about some of the most founding principles of the Constitution, some key articles of the Constitution, and of course women who participated in the making of it. All of you come from the law background, so I will spare myself the work of explaining where this comes from. But we all know that our natural and constitutional rights do not exist in isolation, suspended on a mote of dust. Our relationship with the state, our relationship with the Constitution is an ongoing bilateral talk. And let me remind you, a two-way street that allows us really to access the bridge of rights in case of its violation and infringement. I think the beauty of our Constitution lies in that sentence alone. And I'm going to say that again, probably just not for effect, but also the fact that we realize what has been given to us. It is a Constitution that allows us to bridge and to access the bridge of rights, both in the case of its violation on its infringement. Some of us know, we all know Article 14 that guarantees equality and no discrimination based on sex, gender, caste. And I think that constitutional guarantee really is the heart and soul of our Constitution, that gives us really, that allows us access to equality that is not conditional. If someone was to also ask me what makes the heart and soul of our Constitution, of course, while we continue to quote Article 14, it's also very important that we talk about Article 32 as those from the law fraternity. It wouldn't need me to explain, but still, in the interest of having all of us on the same page, I think it is one of the fundamental rights listed in the Constitution that each citizen is entitled to, which deals with the right to constitutional remedy, or affirms the right to move the Supreme Court by appropriate proceedings for the enforcement of rights conferred in Part 3 of the Constitution. It states that the Supreme Court shall have power to issue directions, orders, or writs, including writs in the nature whichever may be appropriate for the enforcement of any right conferred by this part. The right guaranteed by this article shall not be suspended except as otherwise provided by the Constitution. The article is included in Part 3 of the Constitution, which other fundamental rights, including right to equality, freedom of speech and expression, life and personal liberty, and freedom of religion. Only if any of these fundamental rights would be violated can a person approach the Supreme Court directly under Article 32. Now, this is where the beauty of the Constitution of India lies. Article 14 that guarantees equality, and an Article 32 that guarantees as a fundamental right a constitutional remedy should there be a violation of a fundamental right. And I think it's this really brings together the gist and the life of my belief in the Indian Constitution. And it's very interesting, because during the Constituent Assembly debates in December 1948, a discussion on this fundamental right was being held, and Dr. Ambedkar, who has been widely quoted in this conversation, said, if I was asked to name any particular article in the Constitution, as the most important article, an article without which the Constitution would be a nullity, I would not refer to any article except this one. It is the very soul of the Constitution and the very heart of it. And often when we talk about constitutional guarantees, we don't refer the balance on which 14 Article 14 and 32 stand. We also have to realize that we have so far activated only almost hard to put a number, but only 25% of the true import of Article 32. Of course, also to stress the commendable work done by courts. But like we see, justice sometimes seems like an ivory tower which is mediated through lawyers. And as some of you study law and will eventually be lawyers, hopefully judges, and wishing you luck all the way through, I hope that the delivery of justice will guide your conscience on an everyday basis. In the 7 decades, really, and a little more in the adoption of our constitution, the periphery of access to justice as a crucial fundamental right has really expanded for the beam of time and friction to pass through. And I think any test of a document is also how it passes through the beams of time and friction. And it's quite wonderful to say that, to see how the Indian Constitution has stood the test of time, evolved, changed, amended to really suit a conversation that we're having today of also being one of the youngest populations in the world. Moving away from Article 32 and the provisions of it on seeking justice, I also want to, of course, focus on the other part where I think the soul of the Constitution resides, which is Article 14. And let me talk a little about understanding Article 14, because looking at parity, looking at equality, not as just an amalgamation of equality or equity, but as justice, I think is the most unadulterated form of justice delivery. Let me say that again, which is to understand and look at equality and equity, not to look at parity, not just as a coming together of equality or equity, but just as justice is, I think, the most unadulterated form of justice delivery. The other article, which I think is another tenet on which, well, not a tenet really, but the pillar on which it stands, is also Article 16. Now, this is quite debatable, and I'd appreciate if there were a few questions on this. Is reservation a few weeks ago? Not a few weeks ago, but a matter of time ago, we understood that 50% reservation of women in the judiciary was a matter of right, and much less of any other consideration. We know that at present, and I'm happy to be corrected on the stats, that there are 4 women out of 34 judges, and only 17 women who are 7 senior women advocates, as opposed to 403 men in the Supreme Court. So as we take and celebrate, as Vedant had pointed out, the balancing of the sex ratio in the newest NHFS data that has come out, we must also reflect that while we have taken our time to work on a skewed sex ratio, we're still looking at a very, very skewed sex ratio in positions of decision making. On another ancillary note, the 73rd Amendment, I think, is a classic example of a state working within the international margin of state discretion to meet international obligations. Vedant, in my introduction, had made a reference to CEDAW, which India is a signatory to, which is also the mother document for equality after the Constitution of India, is one of the most binding international conventions on ending discrimination in all forms against women and girls. And the 73rd Amendment is, as most of you would know, is a classic example of a state working with the international margin of state discretion to meet its international obligations. The 73rd Amendment, we know, also flows from India's obligations under Article 7 of CEDAW, which mandates signatories, which India is, to eliminate inequalities that impede women from occupying positions of public office. I think we have some incredible, as we celebrate the Constitution, we have some incredible names that we are missing out. I know that we spoke about this briefly in the beginning, but as we draw away from the constitutional guarantees that we have provided through 14, 20, of course, in the other articles that I referred to, it's also important today to reflect on women who are a part of shaping the Constitution of India. I think it's a conversation that we often ignore. We talk about the founding father of the country, but you never quite see, like Dr. Anil had pointed out, the equality that is guaranteed on paper and the equality that is given both in terms of visibility to women. While it's a well-known fact that the total membership of the Constituent Assembly was about 389, the Constitution itself was drafted by 299 delegates who, let me remind you, were from different castes, religion, regions, and gender. Out of these 299, there were 15 women, quite literally, who wrote history by drafting the document that would be known later as the Constitution of India. If we were to compare this with the present day situation in terms of gender gap, we're ranked 122 out of 153 countries when it comes to women's representation in the parliament, as per the World Economic Forum on Global Gender Gap 2021. On one hand, while we discuss, and which we will, a lack of women occupying positions in public office, to represent and sufficiently represent the society that we serve. On the other hand, we have this affirmatively legislated, gender-just legal system. And just to add to an example of how proud it makes me, our Constitution statutes actually shine even when we compare them to the most developed countries in the world. For example, the United States of America, that has no federal legislation on maternity care, which actually aids and abets the state's benign patriarchy that deems women from being better off as mothers than active and willing members of a fully paid workforce. This reminds us that India has one of the most robust legal systems across the globe that looks at women from a life cycle approach, like they say, from womb to tomb, a part of which is the entitled leave to maternity, now extended from 12 to 26, and actually 6 months now that we're talking about it. Having said that, let's also, like I said, it's important to have the question. It's important to remember and celebrate the 15 women who made that contribution to the Constituent Assembly. Names that we often recognize, names that we often forget. I think when I was very young, the only person I knew who had contributed to the Constitution was Srimati Sarojini Naiduji. In fact, was educated in the United Kingdom, and her exposure to the suffragette movement was perhaps what drew her attention to the Indian freedom movement. But besides her, there were some incredible women too, from really quite interesting to see, from all parts of the country. Let me take a minute to remind you about the contribution of Dakshini Veerayudhan, a spirited fighter and leader of the oppressed classes who broke barriers. She was really among the first of many firsts to be educated from her community, the first scheduled caste woman to graduate in India, that too in science, a member of the Cochin Legislative Council, and today the government of Kerala has constituted the Dakshini Veerayudhan Award, which is to recognize women who contribute towards empowering other women in the state. So I hope in the course of time, we will, when we talk about the founders of our Constitution, the writers, the designers of our Constitution, we will not forget women who broke barriers, jumped barriers actually, to be a part of creating history. It will only be the correct reflection of our own country when we remember those who come from all parts, all religions, all castes, all regions to contribute to the making of India. So today, I want to reiterate, as I speak to a group of potential decision makers in justice delivery to the importance of justice delivery. Particularly working on the gender aspect of things, something that I keep getting asked all the time is, what would change the current situation of violence against women? And as UN Women, we've done a lot of research on what would really change the situation of violence against women and girls in the country. And the answer that we get often is that it is not the severity of the punishment under law, but it is the certainty and the immediacy of punishment that really deters crime. So to one answer like that, to many answers like this, I hope as those who are going to be important, critical, and hopefully very critical to the justice delivery system in India, let me remind you that you are backed by one of the soundest, most progressive, most affirmatively legislated constitutions across the world. As UN Women, we have offices in 193 countries. So I have the good fortune reading through many constitutions and laws and legislations of the world. And I haven't seen, and not because I'm an Indian, well, partially maybe, but not just because I'm an Indian, but as an Indian woman, I have always been very proud when I have turned to the Constitution of India. It reminds us constantly of the grace, the grit, the determination, the vision with which it was written. It was written, the Constitution is still ahead of us. And I think that is the beauty of a well-written Constitution, that it is still ahead of its time. The Constitution still talks about an idea that is ambitious for even the rest of the world. As someone who leads in the system in the United Nations, I've had an opportunity to sit with many countries across the world to discuss their views and their goals. And by their own agreed goals in 2017, not one country in the world today can boast about being a gender equal country. By their own measurement, by their own data, by their own goals, we still don't have a country in the world that can call itself a gender equal country. That is both the opportunity for the world, it is also the tragedy of our times that we have not been able to create an equal world for 50% of the population that holds up the sky. But what we do have is the Constitution that dreams about it, that talks about it, that articulates it. And let me remind you, like I said, it doesn't give you a guarantee. It doesn't give you a constitution, not just gives you a constitutional guarantee to equality. It also gives you a constitutional remedy should there be a violation of any fundamental rights. And I think there's hardly another piece of work that balances really the ask and the demand, all in a couple of sentences and a couple of articles. So as justice delivery, as people who are going to have the law in their hands, as potential lawyers, judges, etc., whatever you may want to be, and wherever life may take you, let me remind you that you will then be the face of the Constitution when you deliver that justice. So there is an incredible amount of responsibility. There is an incredible opportunity on our hands to be that country that we were envisioned to be that country that we had articulated ourselves to be custodians, really. And I don't want to use the word beneficiary, but to really custodians, to own the Constitution and to live it. And I think that's where I hope all of you will be, and hopefully many years from now, we will be having wonderful conversations, still celebrating the day, and the Constitution as it is articulated will still be ahead of us. And as Dr. Ambedkar has been quoted before this in this conversation, let me also take the liberty of quoting him again with something so simple that he said. And he says, however good a constitution may be, it is those who are implementing it. If they're not good, it will prove to be bad. However bad a constitution may be, if those implementing it are good, it will prove to be good. And I think that, my colleagues, defines the role that all of you have in the building of an India that is equitable, that is equal, and that is socially just. The Constitution, like he said, can only provide the organs of the state, such as the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The factors on which the working of those organs of the state depend are people, us, and political parties. They will set up as their instruments to carry out their wishes and their politics. So we are a part of making history. This is the only time in the whole world where gender equality is an actual possibility. Let me say that again. This is factually the only time in the world where gender equality is an actual possibility, which means that today, if me and you and all of us come together and push together and push enough, we have the chance of seeing a gender equal world. But if you and I did nothing different from what we did today. So if tomorrow for Vedant and me and Malvya, Dr. Karuna Malvya looked exactly the same as yesterday, we're looking at gender equality in 2089. That, my colleagues, is something that a superpower like us, a power like us rooted in a constitution like that, cannot afford and should not afford. So hopefully we will all be a part of making history and doing justice to the history that we have inherited. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful and thought-provoking address. Ma'am, you pointed out very interesting, minute fault which we Indians usually do when we address our founding fathers of our constitution, but we forget our mothers. And I too realize as a law student just today, despite being the constitutional law student, I realized today that yes, we do this mistake indeed, and we just say that founding fathers of our constitution. So today I promise that since now on I will not say fathers, but I will say founding parents of our constitution, because equally all the women have also contributed in a constitutional assembly. And in fact, they were the one who rejected the reservation when it was debated, and they said that our provisions or constitution will help, and the future will come. The future women will be representing India. So this was the word I think of. Not remembering the names, but yeah, this was the entire debate when the provisions of reservation for women were being discussed in the Constituent Assembly. So thank you very much, ma'am, for your address. Now I request Joint Coordinator, Assistant Professor Shreya Mukta, ma'am, to give the thanking vote of thanks.
Yeah. Just a moment. Then just ask the audience if they have any questions for the ma'am. Then we can move ahead for the vote of thanks.
I have a question, if I may ask. Ma'am, what is your opinion on reservation for women, considering, as you pointed out, the lack of representation for in women in various officials, like in judiciary also we see, and in fact, Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramanna retreated in his speech that 50% of the seats should be reserved for judiciary, and there are various other leaders who are insisting for this. So, what is your opinion on giving a reservation for women in the official positions, and why is the Parliament reluctant to pass such a law? And what can be the repercussions if we pass such a law?
Vedant, you've asked my favorite question, so it's a good reason for me to continue speaking for another 10 minutes. But it's a fantastic question because you see, it's a question of much debate and much thought. And I'm actually very happy to hear any counter views on this, but this is my personal opinion and where I come from. often when we talk about reservation, we forget the other part of the discourse, which is merit, right? Now, it wouldn't be difficult to agree that merit is and should be a conversation between equals. Merit is not for a conversation between two people who are not equals, right? And here we are talking about 50% of the population that has very distinct structural barriers to equality. And let me give you some examples. 93% of women anywhere in the world, leave alone India, anywhere in the world have gone through some form of intimate partner violence. When we often think of violence, we always think this is something जो किसी और के घर में होता है. This is something that happens somewhere else. But we have all, and let me promise you, we have all known at least one woman in our own lives, first degree, second degree, third degree, that has gone through some form of harassment, abuse. But we still find it very surprising to admit that 93% of women have gone through some form of structural violence. Women spend almost 3 times the amount of their lives on unpaid care work, which means work that is not identified, work that is not counted, work that doesn't feature anywhere. Women have barriers to mobility, barriers to acceptance, barriers to risk, barriers to reward. Of course, now not even counting in the additional barriers of safety, security. Women have 1/4 the access to opportunities that men have in the workforce. So the question that we must ask ourselves is not the question of choice between reservation and merit. The question we must ask ourselves is, are we having a question of merit between the equals? Now, it is my question to you also, can we have a race where the finishing point for me and you is the same, but the starting point is not the same? Will you ever have a race where the starting points are not the same, but the finishing point must be the same? And I think that would be a fundamental violation of our own constitution, because that is not socially just. And that could be in terms of caste, religion, gender, but imagine the intersection of caste, religion, and gender. So you are not just talking about one, when you're looking at a woman, you're not just talking about one kind of discrimination, you are talking about the coming together sometimes of many kinds of discrimination, right? A woman in urban Delhi is not the same as a woman who has no access to the internet and is from Nagaland or is from remote places, right? You're not talking about now bring on that, the lens of being a minority woman from, or an ethnically minority woman from a different space, right? So we must learn to problematize well as a country. And once you problematize well as a country, the debate dies down. The moment you acknowledge that we are not having a conversation among equals, we will not have a conversation choosing between merit and reservation, because then the answer becomes obvious. So the answer to that question lies in the acknowledgement of the actual issues that we face as a country. Number one. Number two, reservation is a policy tool, right? Is a policy tool that is not forever. It is not a forever tool, but it is definitely a tool to empower, encourage disadvantaged parts of the country to fully engage in something. And what we must assess before we have these conversations between merit and reservations is, has the reservation worked for us? Right? And I think as law students, it would be very important for you to understand, has the reservation worked on us? You know, when we had brought in the 73rd Amendment to the Constitution, we had not realized that in 2021, almost all states of India, without reservation, would have 50% of women in the panchayat as leaders. So today, India has more women in grassroots politics than anywhere else in the world. Now, that is a story that we don't boast about enough, but it is worth wearing a badge for, because I think that is historical. It is. I have not seen another country in my experience of working on gender that can boast of so many women at grassroots politics. So has the reservation worked to make an actual change? Yes. Do we need it anymore? Is a question that we must all be open to investigate, right? But did we need it in the first place? Yes. Has it made the change? Yes. How many years has it taken? Well, 25, 30 years. Has it worked? Yes. Do we need it anymore? I think there should be a fair debate on that. But I don't particularly think there is a debate on do we need it, because yes, we need it. We need it because we don't have the same starting points. So as the state, how will you ensure that I have the same starting point for everyone in the country, particularly in a country that is as diverse and as complex? Now, what could be the possible consequences was your question for it. The most, sorry to say, this is a little rude to say online, but the most bogus argument that I have heard about a reservation is this is going to bring in women who do not deserve it, right? Because we automatically in that conversation have assumed that there are already women who deserve it and who don't deserve it. But let me remind you, men have an automatic reservation in the world, right? So we're not really doing a favor by bringing women in. So inherently what we're saying is if we use a reservation, we might bring in women who don't deserve it. Unfortunately, the focus on performance is not so high and not so loud when we're talking about men. When we're evaluating the parliament, we must ask ourselves, is everyone in the parliament there because they deserve it? Well, I don't think there is a very confused answer to that. Some may beat, some may deserve it, some may not, right? But we are very scared of women who get it without deserving it, because women, we think, must earn it. And that, I think, is a fundamental problem in how we think, because women's success and inclusion is conditional. And let me highlight another example.
We did not receive any reply from RP.
I think someone called Sadat is on unmute. So if sir, you could unmute yourselves. So let me come back to the conversation we were having. And let me tell you how we highlight that women's inclusion is conditional. When we talk about female feticide, we pick up a famous sports star. I'm giving you an example, a comparative example. Though it may not be a orange to orange or an apples to apple comparison. Sometimes when we pick a female feticide issue, we pick up a sports star and we say, अगर आप ये देखिए, ये तो टेनिस स्टार बन गई, आप अपनी बेटी को मत मारिए क्योंकि वो टेनिस स्टार बन सकती हैं. You may have possibly killed an athlete, you may have terminated a pregnancy that could have showed out as the scientist that eventually finds a cure to COVID. I don't think that we have to justify so much for a woman to be alive. It is a matter of justice. So, we make these conversations conditional. We make women's inclusion conditional. So, we communicate to the rest of the world that don't terminate your girls because they could be successful. Well, you should not be terminating your girls even if they were unsuccessful. So we must also learn to have women's inclusion as a conversation, as a matter of right. Not as the smart thing to do, but also the right thing to do. So for me, the fallout of a reservation, or the so-quoted fallout of a reservation, is there might be women who don't deserve it, and that to me is inherently assuming that women don't deserve it. One, and two, that women must be there only when they deserve it. We should hold the same standards for men. Two, if that is the performance standards for the country. And three, of course, one of the arguments that I've heard is, when women come in, they don't make the change for other women, right? So a lot of questions that I get asked is, we've had so many women chief ministers, we've had so many women ministers, what have they done for women? I don't think it is the sole onus of women to help women, right? Because gender equality is not just a woman's problem, it is also a man's problem, because it is about biases and stereotypes that most men are caught up in, right? So this is about freeing up the golden cage for them and the lesser cage for us. And so I don't particularly think there is a possible fallout of a reservation if it is responsibly used, responsibly accessed, which puts onus on both the state and the citizen. And if it is if it is a fully calculated, determined tool by the state to bring in equality. And I think, and I'm very, in my view, it has been very useful to make that change. And the 73rd Amendment is a standing evidence to that. However, what I must also acknowledge is that as a society, we must, without opinion, come to the table to discuss whether we need a reservation or not any longer in a certain sense. Like, for example, in the Act of Local Governance, right? I think it's time to come back to the table and ask ourselves whether we need it anymore. Has it been long enough? Has the change been made? Have we created a culture that is going to sustain without reservation? And I think these debates must be had in good spirit. In good spirit, but to me, as a policymaker, as those who works with policymakers, I think the value of reservation is fairly clear, particularly when it comes to gender. I think it has made tremendous impact, and I don't think it brings women who don't deserve in. It has always brought women who deserve it into the circle of power. And the one most beautiful thing that I've observed about women, particularly women, is they may take time to build up to something, but once they know it, they will rein it in. So, and I have seen that in my own experience, particularly with panchayat leaders from this country. So that's my very long answer to very complex questions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your answer. And ma'am, your point of equals is very much relevant. Ma'am, I recall the arguments of Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj when he was advocating for reservation. He had given an example of two horses of same breed, but one horse who is strong and another who is weak. He had done an experiment that both the horses were sent to climb a mountain and were asked to eat the grass. The stronger horse went to the mountain, ate the grass, and came again back. The weak horse was struggling to climb the mountain, and hence he justified the the policy, the concept of reservation for that weaker horse who is unable to climb that mountain, and the state shall provide a push to that horse so that he can reach that mountain and he can have that grass. So yes, ma'am.
My only counter to that example, with all due respect, is the use of the words weaker and stronger, of course, because often we bring down the conversation to things that cannot be debated any longer. And let me tell you why I'm saying this. I was having a conversation with a school, with a set of third graders from the American school in Mumbai, and there's this little boy who asked me a very interesting question. He said, if there is complete acknowledgement that I am strong and she is weak, then we are not equal anyway. So what is the problem with inequality? So the things to consider in your example, as of today, where we sit, is what have we been taught to recognize as strong? What have we been taught to recognize and acknowledge as weak? Should the mountain be the same goal for each other, right? Well, I think that much I agree with. But I think forever we have based this conversation on differences in gender, based on differences on sex, right? Which is our biologically what we are born with. But everything else, almost 90% of what we deal with, is the socialization of the sex, which we must question. So I may slightly, I don't disagree with that example, but I think there are many parts of that example that we must now in 2021 reframe and question, to say, have we been taught to recognize certain things as strong, as weak, as climbing, as not climbing, as success, not success, and how do we accommodate not just gender, but now even we're dealing with people with different sexual orientations. We're in a very, very diverse world, and people with different experiences of life itself. How do we bring that diversity to the thinking table and value that diversity in thinking?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one more question in the chat box, if you could answer that.
I think Vedant, madam has already covered this in this first answer. What are the reasons for females being not appointed, and how the Constitution of India incorporated feminist perspective in its drafting. I think madam has covered this, but if still madam has to add anything, madam can add.
Well, we all know why there are missing women in positions of decision making. Like I said, I spoke about some, even the articulation of justice and delivery of justice sometimes is very male. It's sometimes a male purview. But why, instead of not talking about why we don't have a female justice of India, it's also important to know why do we have women missing in decision making positions. Let's talk about corporate India. 60% of people drop out. We have a 60% dropout at the mid-management level. Of course, it is because of competing priorities, and a lot of people pin that on motherhood. But it's sometimes we really forget that women are also responsible for elderly care in families and general care work. It is also we need, I think, re-energized conversations on why women work in the first place, because that will give us an answer for why women leave when they choose to not work. Also, most women are compelled by their circumstances to be job seekers and not career seekers. And there's, men are encouraged to seek careers and not jobs. आदमी से बड़ा पूछा जाता है, in my experience, what will you do 10 years from now? What will you do 15 years from now? But a woman who's getting married often doesn't see that question. What will you do 15 years from now? Because everybody assumes what she will do 15 years from now. The question is, what will you do today? So most women are also don't have a conducive environment to be career seekers, which is why women drop off. Now, this in addition to structural barriers. I speak as the UN. Even the UN has not seen a woman secretary general, which is really a matter of pity. But this is not just for for India. This is a reality across the globe. So we still have a long way to go before we solve all of these little links to get there. And of course, the Constitution of India is an intrinsically feminist document. And has incorporated the feminist perspective, not just through because there were 15 women, but I think Dr. Ambedkar brought in the most feminist perspective on the table. So this is just to reiterate that feminism doesn't need to come through women. Feminism comes through men. Feminism comes through everywhere, because feminism is just another word that, and Hillary Clinton made this, statement that drew so much attention. And she said that, feminism is just the radical idea that women too are human beings, right? But whenever we talk about it, and it drew so much media attention, but it was so basic a statement that it is this radical notion that women too are human beings. So sometimes you don't know where your feminism is coming from. It can come from men, it can come from women, it can come from children, it can come from anywhere. But it essentially comes through the idea of equality and the recognition that women too are human beings. So, like I said, congratulations again to one of the most feminist constitutions in the world, and I'm very, very proud to belong to this.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, another thing which you gave us right now by stating that India's constitution is one of the feminist constitution, and I really would like to quote you in my articles and in my exam papers also. So thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful words. Now I request Shriya Mukta, ma'am, for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vedant. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Maharashtra National Law University, Professor Dilip Ukheji. Esteemed Registrar, Maharashtra National Law University, Professor Anil Vediechi. Coordinator of Center of Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice, Dr. Karuna Akshay Malviyaji. Our esteemed panelists, Ms. Nishtha Satyam, Head of Office, United Nations Women, Taimur Liste, and esteemed faculty of Maharashtra National Law University, galaxy of intellectual participants who have joined today's online panel discussion on theme Empowering Women Through Constitutional Guarantees in India. With enthusiasm and interactive spirit, a very good evening to one and all present. I deem it my proud privilege to present vote of thanks on behalf of Center of Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice on this occasion. I extend my gratitude to co-patron of today's panel discussion, our esteemed and vibrant registrar, Professor Anil Vediatri, for giving his opening remarks in a very enthusiastic and articulistic way on this occasion. Sir, your remarks set the tone for today's panel discussion. I am thankful to Coordinator of Center of Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice, Dr. Karuna Akshay Malveji, for coordinating today's panel discussion and giving welcome address on this occasion, ma'am. I am thankful to our worthy panelists, Ms. Nishtha Satyam, Head of Office, United Nations Women, Timor-Leste, who gave her thought-provoking presentation on theme Empowering Women Through Constitutional Guarantees in India in a very comprehensive, logical, and rational way. Thanks for giving such informative, encouraging, inspiring, motivating lecture, ma'am. You have rightly said the Constitution is still ahead of its time. It does not only give constitutional guarantee, but it also gives constitutional remedy for women empowerment. I am thankful to my Honorable Vice Chancellor for showing faith in me and giving me opportunity to be the joint coordinator of Center of Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice. Your encouragement is catalyst for organizing activities in our university, sir. I appreciate and acknowledge sincere efforts made by Vedant to be the moderator of today's panel discussion and performing his duties as moderator very efficiently and effectively. I shall be failing in my duty if I don't acknowledge wholehearted support of technical assistance and cooperation given to us by Manoharji to organize today's panel discussion. A very big thank you to all the worthy participants who joined us today on this virtual platform. Your presence is the source of inspiration for all of us. I would just conclude by saying, don't ask what your country has given to you. Ask what you can give to your country. Let us celebrate this occasion of Indian Constitution Day by taking pride in our Constitution and by abiding by it. Wishing you all a very happy Indian Constitution Day. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam, again from
Thank you
Maharashtra
very
National
much.
Law University.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. Good luck to all your students, and hopefully we will do
Thank
this
you, ma'am.
again. Thank you.
Madam, we'll be in touch for future collaboration and projects. Thank you.